Hi, folks. Welcome to the Prepared Homestead. This is Travis. Thank you all for stopping by to watch. I apologize for the voice. Yes, my voice is raspy, strained it a little bit, but I'm okay. No illness, just voice strain. For those of you that live in central Oklahoma, and really from Oklahoma all the way over to eastern Arkansas, eastern Missouri, up into Kansas, you need to be on high alert, especially central Oklahoma. Looks like they're going to get hit again with some very serious storms. I'm basing this on what the weather forecasters are saying, but it looks to be a doozy building up. It may already be happening by the time you watch this, so definitely be prepared. I understand that there's probably some manipulation going on with the weather, but can we control that? No, we can't fix that. But what we can do is just get ourselves prepared for what's going on. And it looks like a pretty gnarly weather night here in Missouri, where I live. Probably will hit over after midnight is what it looks like. So just keep getting yourselves prepared. I'm gonna make a video today. This video, what I'm about to say, is probably going to bring out the haters. Might lose some viewers over this. I think it might ruffle some feathers. And I'm not making this video with the intent to ruffle feathers. Ever since I started making these videos years ago, my primary goal is to wake people up. Wake people up to get ready for what's happening, what's to come. Whether it's you lost your job or you broke your leg or a tornado or, the apocalypse happens. Whatever it is, we need to get ready for that. And we need to disconnect ourselves as much as possible from the system and be as self-sufficient as possible. And that system could be the grid, it could be the supply chain, but it could also be misinformation that's fed to us. And I'm not talking about CNN and MSNBC or even Fox News. I'm talking about even conservative information. And I'm even talking about some prepping information that's being spread around. And so that is my intent, to get you to think outside of the box, think for yourself, and not just believe what you're told. And I hope that that's what I get across today. I've been into preparedness and survivalism before preparedness was even a thing. In fact, I was well prepared long before even the Y2K event. I kind of chuckled at that time of people panicking and buying stuff when I already had a nice little stockpile. I've been doing this my whole life, grew up this way, and mentored under a couple of really fine gentlemen as a young man. That were, from the Vietnam era, and they were the old survivalists. So I come by this from just experience in doing things. And I have seen since the advent of the internet, especially YouTube, but Twitter also, and just other social media, of a change in prepping, a change in preparedness. And that change has become, well, the way to survive everything is to be as tactical as possible, to have the coolest gear, the latest technology, and to become basically some operator so that you can survive whatever comes. It doesn't matter if you are self-sufficient. It doesn't matter if you are able to treat illnesses or if you're able to go out here and forage for medicines or foods. It doesn't matter if you can raise animals. It doesn't matter if you can give basic emergency medical care. As long as you have the cool gear and as long as you have, that level of training and you're trying to emulate some type of guy that you've seen in a movie, then you're going to be good. And I'm seeing more and more of that. And I've begun to wonder, although I haven't necessarily convinced myself of this, but I've begun to wonder if this is all part of a psyop too, to convince people, okay, we're not going to discourage them from prepping. We're just going to distract them and get them doing something that's actually not going to make them prepared. And so let's be the interwebs and promote all of these things that we're going to say is preparedness when really you're not really that much more prepared than anyone else. And I know that hurts a lot of feels, and I know that it's may anger some people, but having your fancy AR rifles and your fancy scopes and your high-speed gear and going out there and figuring out the coolest, latest way to hold your rifle and to move and shoot is not going to be enough. You will probably die just like everyone else if that's the only thing that you're doing, if that's where your focus is, if that's where you're putting all of your effort into. Now, before anyone starts to get too ruffled, I want to make it clear that I very much advocate having firearms and training with them and being proficient in them. But there's a difference between doing that along with all the other things that you do in preparedness and doing only that and putting only focus on that. Also, along with this is this idea, this concept that the odds are when things collapse, it's going to be like a Call of Duty video game scenario where it's just every man for himself, put all of your gear on, and whoever's the last man standing is the one that's going to win. Odds are it's not going to be that way. In fact, statistically and historically speaking, most of you probably won't ever need to use your firearm other than to put down some stray dog or to kill your dinner. That's just a historical fact. If you look over the past century of various governments and countries that collapsed or came very near collapsing or had some type of massive problem that kind of shut things down for a while, it was not very common in any of those situations where people ended up just, going Mad Max on each other and shooting each other in the streets and stuff. While that kind of stuff did happen, and there were certain areas where crimes increased in that way, it was typically in the areas that already had high crimes, where you had gangs and stuff that just become more active, doing more violence and trying to control more area. But the average person, and especially the average death in these scenarios, was not necessarily as a result of some type of guerrilla warfare combat. And I know that there's going to be a lot of arguments on here that is what we're going to have to face. We're going to have to face our own government, or we're going to have to face the Russians or the Chinese or some Mexican cartel or whatever. It's possible. It is possible. But I don't think that that's the most likely scenario for the average person. It's all going to depend on where you're at, what you're doing, all of that. The average person that goes through a situation like what we would call an SHTF ends up perishing because of a simple, small thing. It's usually some type of illness, some type of bacteria, some type of pathogen, some type of parasite, a virus. Those are usually the things that kill most people. And we focus on having a $2,500 rifle and $1,000+ worth of kit and going out there and getting the most high-speed available training you can get for a civilian that's taught by some guy that was former Delta or former Navy SEAL or former Ranger or whatever. And then you go out there and you get just enough medical care to take you through a combat situation, and you think that you're good. Now, again, I'm not saying that any of those things are bad. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm not saying you shouldn't do them. I'm saying that if that's your only thing that you're doing, or if that is your primary focus, or if that is where you see things, you're going to end up being short-sighted. I'm pretty sure of it. And you need to expand your view. You need to not be so narrow-minded about what you see is going to happen. I could be wrong. I really could be wrong. But what's going to happen if I'm wrong? I mean, not so much. I'm telling you to do some of those things, but to expand your focus and to do other things. Take, for instance, medical training. I talked about it yesterday and was encouraging folks to get out there and to do more medical training, to go out there and get professional training, first responder, different types of advanced first aid, wilderness first aid. There's different, American Heart Association, American Red Cross, they have different, they call it different things sometimes, BLS training, all of this kind of stuff you should have. And you're able to get it because it's available out there and should have the equipment to do basic emergency medical care. If your only focus is to put a tourniquet on or to put a chest seal on, which is a good thing to have, and it's a good thing to be able to do, but if that's the only thing that you have and the only thing that you know how to do, you're cutting yourself short, because the odds are you're going to find many more other medical problems to deal with than just that. In fact, I would guess, and this is just my guess, that the average person that lives through a collapse of the United States is probably going to perish because their body is extremely stressed. They've never been through anything like this before. They're not getting sleep. And so because of that continual stress and lack of sleep, their immunity system is low. They're not eating healthy. They're barely taking in enough calories to stay alive. And what they're probably eating is either junk food, MREs, or freeze-dried food. And none of that is very nutrition dense. And so they're not getting the nutrition that they need. They're probably also drinking poor quality water because their local water source has now turned into a sewer because the sewer treatment plant has gotten backed up because the grid's down, and now your water system, the creek that runs behind your house or out behind the city that you live in, is now just a big cesspool. And it's probably also because of just the fact that they haven't bathed or changed clothes in weeks, and so they're filthy and they're tired and they're wet. And all of those things cause your immunity to become lower. And then you come into contact with some type of common cold or a flu virus, or you get a scratch on you and it gets infected, or you drink too much of the nasty water, even though you've filtered it through your socks many times and you've boiled it to death, and you've even been able to scrounge up a few drops of Clorox and put in it. You still end up getting some kind of pathogen because it's absolutely filthy sewer water. And you lay there for a week or two, feverish, vomiting, diarrhea. You've got some pretty cool gear, but you end up dying because of something very simple. That's probably going to be the most common scenario for most people. And I don't think a lot of preppers think about that. They're focused on the cool stuff. And I think that between video games, the addiction to get more clicks on YouTube, the movies, all of that kind of stuff has promoted this idea that the collapse is going to be some romanticized combat scenario that's going to make it feel like the video games that everyone's been playing. And like I said, the one that has the coolest gear is the one that's gonna rise above the ashes. And while that could be true, I highly doubt that it is true. Several weeks ago, maybe a few months ago, I talked about this sort of. I had done a little research on my own, and I was curious about if I could find out when the first time in American culture or pop culture, this concept of a complete collapse, and every man for himself, and if you've got the coolest gear and the biggest guns, then you're going to survive. When did that come about? And it took me a while, but I actually found an article talking about this, written several years ago. And in that article, they said that the earliest known instance of this in any type of book or movie or anything was the movie Mad Max. And since then, there have been multiple movies produced of that type of scenario where, if you got the gear and you go out there as a lone wolf and you fight off all the bad guys, you're going to survive. They never show that lone wolf out there with the cool gear figuring out where he's going to eat or what he's going to do when he gets stung by something or bit by something with a pathogen or scrapes his leg or becomes ill from drinking poorly cooked food or contaminated water. No one shows that. No one shows that guy running around in, old special forces uniform or something like that, looking for things to eat in the woods, or collecting herbs that he can make a medicine out of, or going back to his homestead and tending to his sheep or his chickens, or trying to grow the tomatoes. No one shows that kind of stuff. Why? Because it's not cool. It's not high speed enough. And I'm not knocking any type of gear. I'm not knocking any type of training. I'm certainly not knocking someone that has a special operations background or is teaching that kind of stuff. I'm just telling you that if that is your focus, if that's what you believe is going to protect you when everything starts falling apart around us, I have a distinct feeling that you're going to be sadly mistaken. And you need to be looking at things differently. Yes, those things are important, but you need to be expanding your focus, figuring out how you're going to just live daily. You may never have to use a firearm. You may never have to plug a hole or put a tourniquet on. But the odds are you're going to deal with a cut, a scrape. You're going to deal with a back injury or neck injury. All of those things happen already. And the more that we're trying to live self-sufficient, and the more people that are going to end up going out there and cutting a tree down with an axe but have never done it before, the odds are they're going to get injured more often. And those are the kind of things that's going to kill people. Those are the kind of things that's going to put them down. And if you don't have a method to treat them, and not just treat them in the immediate, but treat them afterwards, I say in the classes that I teach, I tell people tourniquets are great. They're great for using right now. But in an SHTF, if you don't have the other steps after that tourniquet is applied, the person's still going to die. Because if the injury is bad enough that it really needs a tourniquet, then there's really only two scenarios that's going to save that person's life. Having surgery on the injury, or amputating that limb and hoping and praying that you can cauterize that wound and treat the infection and that they don't die from that, because any other scenario is pretty much going to end up in death. And so if we're only focusing on that very initial step and not anything else, in the end, we're not going to be any more prepared than we were before. So don't just focus on how much beans and rice you can store up. Also focus on how you can start producing your own food. How much medicine can you store, but how many things that grow out here around you that you can use as medicines? Can you do that immediate early triage care? Well, what do you do after that, the next day? How do you keep the fever down and the infection and help the healing process and do wound changes? And can you find the things to do those types of changes? If you haven't stocked up enough wound care, what is out in nature that maybe you can use for wound care? These are questions you should be asking yourself, and these are things that you should be working on, because preparedness is way more than just a Hollywood movie or even a video game. It's not just about being cool, it's about surviving. And I think a lot of people far too often forget that. Folks, don't be one of them. Get your houses in order and prepare yourselves mentally, physically, and spiritually. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.